Imagine living in sunny California in the 1970s. You've just bought your dream home in a safe suburban neighborhood. You lock your doors at night, kiss your family goodnight, and drift off to sleep. But someone's watching. Someone's been watching for days. And tonight, he's coming inside. This is the story of one of the most terrifying serial criminals in American history. A man who terrorized California for over a decade, committed at least 50 home invasions, 13 murders, and then just vanished. For 40 years, he was a ghost. Police had his DNA. They had his voice on tape. They had sketches and hundreds of clues, but they couldn't find him. Until 2018, when a pizza crust and some family tree websites finally brought him down in one of the most shocking captures in true crime history. This is the story of the Golden State Killer. And trust me, the ending is absolutely wild. Our story actually starts in a small California town called Visalia in 1974. Now, Visalia was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors. Crime was low, life was good, until someone started breaking into homes. At first, it seemed like typical burglaries. Someone was getting into houses through windows, stealing small items, coins, photos, personal belongings. Weird stuff, not the usual electronics and jewelry. Over 100 homes were hit. But here's the creepy part. Sometimes, nothing was stolen at all. The intruder would just rearrange things, move items around, rifle through drawers like he was playing some sick game. The police called him the Visalia Ransacker. And then in September 1975, things took a dark turn. A man named Claude Snelling heard someone in his daughter's bedroom. He confronted the intruder, and the ransacker shot him dead, just like that. The daughter described the killer as a young man, average height, wearing a ski mask. A few months later, a police officer almost caught him. There was a shootout, but the ransacker escaped. And then, the break-ins in Visalia just stopped. The police thought maybe he moved away. But they had no idea that their small-town prowler was about to become California's worst nightmare. June 18, 1976, Sacramento. A young woman is home alone when she hears a noise. Before she can react, a masked man is in her bedroom, shining a flashlight in her face. He's wearing a ski mask and gloves. He ties her up with shoelaces he brought with him, ransacks the house, and disappears into the night. This was the first attack by what police would call the East Area Scrappist, and over the next 3 years, he would attack at least 50 women across Northern California. But what made him truly terrifying wasn't just the number of attacks. It was how he operated. This guy was like a real-life horror movie villain, but somehow worse because he was completely real. Let me break down his method because it's absolutely chilling. First, the stalking. He didn't just randomly pick houses. He would stake out neighborhoods for weeks, sometimes months. He'd jog through at odd hours, peer into windows, watch people's routines. Neighbors would report seeing a strange man hanging around, but by the time police arrived, he'd be gone. He'd break into homes when no one was there just to learn the layout. He'd unlock windows. He'd hide tools in the yard. He was preparing. Second, the phone calls. He'd call his victims before attacking, sometimes days before, sometimes hours. He'd breathe heavily, whisper threats, say things like, "I'm gonna kill you," or "gonna kill you, gonna kill you." Some victims received dozens of hang-up calls. One woman reported getting calls for weeks after her attack, with the caller just breathing and occasionally whispering her name. Imagine that psychological torture. Third, the attacks themselves. He'd usually strike between 2 and 4 a.m. He'd wear a mask, gloves, and sometimes a weird disguise. Multiple victims described him as wearing what looked like homemade ski masks with weird eye holes. He'd often attack couples, and here's his signature move that still gives me chills. He'd wake up the couple, tie up the man face down with shoelaces, always shoelaces, and then stack dishes or a teacup on the man's back. China plates, bowls, whatever he could find. Then he'd tell them, "If I hear those dishes rattle, I'll kill you both." Can you imagine? You're lying there, completely helpless, hearing everything happening to your loved one, but you can't move. One wrong breath and those dishes fall and you're both dead. But here's what made him even more terrifying. He'd spend hours in the homes. He'd ransack everything, eat food from the fridge, make himself comfortable. Sometimes he'd cry or talk to himself. Victims reported hearing him muttering things like, "I hate you, Bonnie," or having full conversations with himself. By 1977, Sacramento was in complete panic mode. This wasn't stranger danger anymore. This was real. People were buying German Shepherds, installing alarm systems, forming armed neighborhood watches. Gun stores couldn't keep up with demand. Community meetings were packed with hundreds of terrified residents. Some people literally moved out of Sacramento. Police were working overtime. They set up task forces, stakeouts, had officers hiding in houses they thought would be targeted. But this guy was always one step ahead. And then he made it personal with the police. In October 1977, he called a Sacramento detective and left a message. Heavy breathing then, gonna kill you, gonna kill you. The detective had been working the case nonstop, and now the killer was targeting him. But the East Area Scrappist never followed through. Instead, he did something even weirder. He moved. The East Area Scrappist last confirmed attack in Northern California was in July 1979, and then, nothing. The attacks just stopped. Police were baffled. Did he die? Get arrested for something else? Move out of state? But in October 1979, something terrible happened 400 miles south in Goleta, near Santa Barbara. A couple, Dr. Robert Offerman and Alexandria Manning, were found shot to death in their home. It was brutal. Overkill. The killer had used a .38 caliber weapon, which matched the gun used by the Visalia ransacker years earlier. But police didn't make the connection yet. 2 months later, it happened again. Another couple, Lyman and Charlene Smith, murdered in their home in Ventura County, bludgeoned to death with a log from their own fireplace. The scene was horrific. Between 1979 and 1986, at least 13 people were murdered across Southern California in similar home invasions. The MO was slightly different. Now he was killing instead of just attacking, but the signatures were there. The stalking, the preparation, the dishes stacked on victims, the weird behavior inside the homes. Police called this new killer the original Night Stalker, and for over 20 years they had no idea he was the same person as the East Area Scrappist. They were literally hunting for two different people. Then in 2001, DNA technology had advanced enough that they could compare old evidence. And boom, they got a match. The DNA from the East Area Scrappist attacks matched the DNA from the original Night Stalker murders. It was the same guy. One man, 3 different names, 3 different crime sprees spanning 10 years and the entire state of California. They gave him a new name that encompassed everything. The Golden State Killer. But here's the gut punch. Even with this breakthrough, they were no closer to catching him. They had his DNA, but it wasn't in any database. They had sketches from dozens of witnesses, but they didn't match anyone. They had his voice recorded on answering machines, but voice analysis led nowhere. The case went cold. Ice cold. It became one of those legendary unsolved mysteries. Retired detectives worked on it in their spare time. True crime enthusiasts obsessed over it. Michelle McNamara wrote an entire book about it called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. She died before finishing it, never knowing how close they were to solving it. By 2017, everyone assumed the Golden State Killer was either dead or would never be caught. The crimes were too old, the trail too cold. And then one investigator had a crazy idea. Okay, so let's talk about 2018. You know those ancestry websites like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, where people send in their DNA to find out if they're part Viking or discover they have a long-lost cousin in Nebraska? Well, there's also this website called GEDmatch, which is a free, open-source database where people upload their DNA data to find relatives. Investigator Paul Holes had been working the Golden State Killer case for decades. He was about to retire, and this case haunted him. So he and his team tried something that had never been done before in a criminal investigation. They took the DNA profile from the crime scenes and uploaded it to GEDmatch, pretending to be a regular person looking for relatives. Now, they weren't looking for an exact match. They knew the killer's DNA wouldn't be in there. They were looking for relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, anyone genetically related. And they found some. Distant relatives who had uploaded their DNA, completely unaware they were related to one of America's most wanted criminals. Then began the most insane genealogical investigation ever. They built family trees going back generations. They found common ancestors. They traced down every branch of every family. They narrowed it down to a handful of men who were the right age, lived in California during the crimes, and fit the general description. And one name kept coming up. Joseph James DeAngelo. Joseph DeAngelo was a 72-year-old man living in Citrus Heights, a suburb of Sacramento. He was a retired mechanic, a grandfather, seemed like a normal old guy. His neighbors described him as quiet, maybe a bit grumpy, but nothing suspicious. Oh, and here's the kicker. He was a former police officer. He'd worked for the Exeter Police Department in the early 70s, and then the Auburn Police Department until 1979, right when the East Area Scrappist attacks were happening. He was fired from Auburn PD for shoplifting dog repellent and a hammer. A hammer. Seems pretty suspicious in hindsight, right? But police needed to be 100% sure, so they followed him, they watched him, and then they got their evidence in the most mundane way possible. One day, D'Angelo went to a Hobby Lobby. He bought some stuff, threw the shopping bag in a trash can in the parking lot. Once he left, investigators grabbed that bag. They swabbed it for DNA. A few days later, he was seen tossing something out of his car. They collected it. It was a tissue, and then they watched him go to a restaurant. When he left, they went in and found his table. He'd left some food on his plate. They took that too. The DNA from these items? Perfect match to the Golden State Killer. On April 24, 2018, police moved in. D'Angelo was in his front yard. Officers surrounded him, weapons drawn, and arrested him. He looked confused, shocked. He reportedly said, "I have a roast in the oven," as they handcuffed him. His neighbors watched in complete disbelief. The arrest made international headlines. The Golden State Killer, after 40 years, was finally caught. And the method, using genealogy websites, completely changed criminal investigations forever. It's now called genetic genealogy, and it's been used to solve dozens of cold cases since. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. During the investigation of his home, they found some creepy stuff. There were stolen items from victims, jewelry, rings, trophies he'd kept for decades. D'Angelo's trial was complicated. He was 74 years old by the time it went to court. In 2020, he pled guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and admitted to numerous other crimes. In a bizarre court proceeding, victims and their families confronted him. Some yelled at him. Some cried. Some told him they forgave him, which seemed to hurt him more than the anger. One victim's daughter said, "I've listened to that tape where you called my mother and said that you were going to kill her. That voice has been haunting me for 44 years. I was 15 years old, and now I got to confront you." Another survivor who'd been attacked in 1976 looked him in the eye and said, "You can't ever take away what we have accomplished in our lives." D'Angelo showed almost no emotion during most of it, but at one point he made a brief statement. He said, "I've listened to all your statements, each one of them, and I'm truly sorry for everyone I've hurt." His voice was weak, shaky, nothing like the terrifying whisper victims remembered. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 11 consecutive life sentences. He's currently in a California state prison, and he'll die there. But the story doesn't really end there, because the big question remains, why? What turned Joseph D'Angelo into the Golden State Killer? Was it his time as a cop? Was it something in his childhood? Was it the Bonnie he'd cry about during attacks? His ex-fiancée who broke off their engagement in 1970, right before the crime started? We'll probably never know the full truth. D'Angelo has given no real explanation. He's remained mostly silent about his motives. And that might be the most frustrating part of all. We caught the monster, but we can't understand what made him monstrous. What we do know is that DNA and genealogy solved what seemed unsolvable. Families got closure, survivors got justice, and one of the most prolific criminals in American history is behind bars. The Golden State Killer terrorized California for over a decade and evaded capture for 40 years. He attacked at least 50 people, murdered 13, and shattered countless lives. But in the end, it was his own DNA, his own biology, that brought him down. So what do you think? Does genetic genealogy cross a privacy line, or is it worth it to solve cold cases? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this story as wild as I did, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries and true crime. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And remember, lock your windows.